Falconry is the age-old art of training a bird of prey to hunt with man. It is not a question of dominance, but instead a bond or partnership between bird, man and dog. It's a tremendously exciting experience to train an essentially wild bird of prey to fly and return. If you get it right, the experience is unforgettable, but if you get it wrong, you can kill the bird. In the making of this story, we filmed the training as it happened. Unfortunately, the birds behaved rather too well, and often the handling of them looks too easy. Let me also apologize in advance for the verbal fluffs, but the actions were more important than the words. Birds of prey are divided into various different groups. For the purposes of falconry, they're divided into four: the falcons, the hawks, the buzzards and the eagles. The group we have here are the falcons, and all of these that you see here, bar one, are suitable for falconry birds. Probably the best known and the least suitable for most of us is the peregrine. The reason it's the least suitable is that it needs the most expensive countryside to fly in. To do it justice, you need to fly a peregrine in either really good partridge country in Norfolk, or else go up to Scotland, or maybe northern England, where you've got plenty of grouse in open moorland country. They're not the most expensive of birds to buy, but they are the most expensive of birds to fly. To also do them justice, you need to have at least 6 weeks off so that you can fly them every day and get them going really well. So the majority of us don't fly them, not because we don't like them or that they're too expensive, but because we can't afford the time or the place. Sakers are not very greatly used in this country. I'm surprised. They make good falconry birds, and they are the one falcon who actually likes taking ground game. So these can be used not only off the fist at rooks, but they could also be used off the fist at rabbits, not hares, they're too big, but certainly the females could take pheasants. This is a male that's 2 years old, just going from immature to adult plumage. Now next to him is a cross, a hybrid, between two species. They've got certain advantages. They have what's called hybrid vigor. They're much more energetic. This is a cross between peregrines and sakers, and it's a male. We haven't flown very many of them, but those that we have flown have shown tremendous potential, and this bird will be following through the training and going up to Scotland with. We have two that I haven't got on show here, and those are the lugger and the prairie falcon. Again, both of them good hunting birds, so long as you persevere. Both of them, particularly the prairie falcon, have a difficult temperament, to say the least. Prairies can be an absolute pain in the rear end, but if you can get over that first 3 weeks of hell with them hanging upside down, screaming and generally being awful, then once you've got them tame and settled, they're one of the bravest falcons there are, and will crash into cover after quarry quite happily. Lanners are my favourites, I would say. Dynamite birds for partridges if you work well with them. They've been underused again in this country because we used to have only wild ones in from abroad. Now with the captive bred ones, these would make very good falconry birds in the more enclosed countryside that most of us have. Kestrels are not falconry birds, without any shadow of doubt. You can't catch very much with them. You get the odd one that will, but generally they're catching worms and mice, neither of which make particularly good eating for humans. They're difficult to train because they're small, and the smaller the bird, the narrower the margin of error. And last but not least is the merlin. I say last because we're seeing it last, and also because it's the last of the falcons anyone wants to train. You need to be so experienced with these little birds. This little male here is only 16 weeks old and flies at 4¼ ounces at the moment, which means that if I go too low, it would be incredibly easy to kill him. Flown in open country, they used to be the ladies' falcon in the Middle Ages, and they're wonderful in the first 6 to 8 weeks of their hunting life because they will ring up after larks and give you the most dramatic flight of all. But if you're going to hunt larks with them, you need a license from the DofE to do it. These are the buzzards. You'll notice that these birds are sitting on different perches from the falcons. The falcons sit on blocks which have a curved top which simulates the sort of rock or cliff that they would be sitting on in the wild. The buzzards and the hawks sit on a bow perch which simulates the branch of a tree that they might be sitting on in the wild. There are 4 buzzards used in falconry in this country, of which we have 2 here. The common buzzard, which is not here, is slightly smaller than the red-tailed buzzard and has much smaller feet. It's a good beginner's bird because of its size. The bigger the bird, the less you're liable to kill it when you're training it in the early stages. But because it has very small feet, it's not so capable of catching large quarry. Although buzzards have suffered badly from myxomatosis in this country in the wild, because the rabbit population went down, the buzzard population went down as well. They are extremely good at catching rabbits, so long as you persevere with them. The other buzzard that I would not recommend in the slightest, unless you have an immense amount of time and patience and very open countryside to fly it in, is the ferruginous buzzard. They're birds of the open plain. They've got long pointed wings, and they live in the northern plains in North America, and in wooded country they're useless. They can't get up the sort of speed they need, and they can't maneuver and stop. So unless you have decent country, don't touch them. However, the red-tailed buzzard is a much better falconry bird altogether. It's bigger and more powerful than the common buzzard. It's got a bit more go about it, and it's capable of hunting rabbits, hares, partridges if you get it very fit, moorhens, coots, ducks, squirrels, which you have to be careful with because they can bite a bird's foot quite badly, and they'll regularly take pheasants so long as they're fit. Both the red-tailed buzzard and the Harris hawk are super birds for a beginner, because as the beginner is learning, the bird is learning. As the beginner gets better, the red-tail and the Harris will develop with him. The Harris hawk is probably the most popular falconry bird in this country at the moment. It's almost a buzzard and almost a hawk. It's between the two. Its Latin name is Parra-Buteo unicinctus, which means like buzzard. It belongs almost to both families. It's got the long tail and the shorter wings of the hawk, the long legs of the hawk, but the very big, powerful feet of the buzzard, and a much milder temperament than the hawk. A lot of people use them just as weekend birds, those people who haven't got time to fly them during the week, and you can go in, pick it up and take it out flying because they're tame enough and relaxed enough to be able to cope with that sort of hunting. They will also take a wide variety of game. Both the Harris and the red-tail, if you look after them well, will actually be with you for anything up to 25 years. After the Harris hawk come the true hawks, the accipiters. There are probably 3, maybe 4 in this country that you could get hold of. The black sparrowhawk, which we breed here, the Cooper's hawk, which is not being bred over here yet, but I think will be soon, and then the 2 British hawks, the sparrowhawk, which is the most difficult of all of the hawks to train, and the goshawk, of which we have one here behind us. But as a beginner, they're not a bird that anyone should ever attempt. They're temperamental, they're nervous, they're inclined to die on you if you don't know what you're doing. So really you cannot attempt any of the hawks until you stop being a beginner and you know exactly what you're doing. Eagles. Not the sort of bird for most people to fly, but we thought we'd show you some anyway. If you're going to fly eagles at all, you have to remember that this is a potentially dangerous bird. This is a male golden eagle here, and he cannot tell the difference between rabbits and Yorkshire Terriers. And it gets extremely embarrassing if your eagle goes around catching people's terriers. Ow! Will you be a bit more gentle? But if you have got the right sort of countryside to fly them in, and Scotland is obviously the place to fly golden eagles, then they're wonderful. But don't think you can do it unless you have no job, an awful lot of money, and thousands of acres to fly over with complete safety. Otherwise, the big eagles like golden eagles are a waste of time, and if the wrong people fly them, falconry may well get banned because of it. There are smaller eagles which you can fly, and in this country the only one that's being bred is the tawny eagle. It's not being bred in very great numbers, and the ones that we breed sadly are all hand-reared, not parent-reared, which makes them more difficult to manage. This is a female tawny eagle of the Indian variety, and her name is Alex. And these are capable of taking roughly the same sort of quarry that a golden's going to take if you're hunting with it. They'll take hares, they'll take rabbits, they would probably take pheasants as well, although most of the eagles need space. But you don't need quite so much space with these eagles as you do with the goldens or the big eagles. The options anyway are fairly limited in this country for the eagles that you can actually get hold of, and probably the only one available at the moment, unless you start importing, is this one. If If you were going to take up keeping a horse, you would get somewhere to keep it and food and saddlery before getting it. The same applies when taking up falconry. Good quarters are essential, as is a food supply and a vet, and without permission to hunt over at least 1,000 acres of land, serious hunting is just not possible. As all birds of prey are protected by law in Britain, the legal position should be understood by anyone wanting to own one. The guys to ask are the Department of the Environment and the best of British luck. Travelling birds is not normally a problem except in very hot summers, when it is best to avoid the heat of the day. Always travel untrained birds in a large, strong, carpeted box. Hoods have been around for centuries. They are used to calm a bird by putting it in the dark. We will often hood a bird while fitting tail bells and jesses. Actually, I usually hood them to keep them quiet, as falcons can object to things in an extremely noisy fashion. We have 2 people available when getting a new bird out of the breeding pens ready to start training. Most birds of prey have sharp talons, so while the bird is still in the catch net, we clip off the sharp tips from the talons, because the quickest way for a bird to get a foot infection is by puncturing its own foot with its talons. The jesses are leather straps placed on the bird's legs. These work in the same way as a collar on a dog. They give you something to hold on to. Although there have been many different types invented over the last decade or so, I only favour 2 types for use in Britain. The traditional jess is a leather strap which threads through itself. The advantage of this type is that there's no metal eyelet to put pressure on the leg and subsequently cause injury. We only use traditional jesses on falcons, as ours are supposed to be trained not to sit in trees. Hawks and buzzards, however, often hunt from trees, and so could get caught up by the straps. Aylmer jesses are much more modern. They are a short leather bracelet held round the bird's leg with an eyelet, through which is threaded a removable leather strap. They were invented by a British falconer called Guy Aylmer, hence the name. The straps are removed for hunting.
Foot off my hand. Okay.
At times, during any captive bird's life, it will have to be cast or held physically. It is all too easy to damage the vital flight feathers, and so we wrap a bird up while holding it. Notice how we always try to avoid self-inflicted injury with those powerful feet by using a cushion for the bird to hold on to. Also notice that although this is an unhandled bird, it really doesn't seem too worried by what is happening to it. The trick is to be confident in the handling, which will transmit to the bird. To put a tail bell on, you need a bell. This is fixed through a piece of plastic or a plectrum so it doesn't drop through the tail feathers. Glue, I use rapid araldite. I don't like super glue. All I do is stick my fingers together with it, but rapid araldite works well. Thread and wax to thread the wax. Wax the thread. A piece of paper and a bulldog clip to isolate the 2 tail feathers that you want. You need a pair of leather punches to get the bell ready, a pair of scissors, and most important, a curved needle. And if you haven't got a curved one, do what we did and curve it in the gas fire. The whole point of a bell is to help locate a bird should it be out of sight on a kill or have decided to go AWOL. I can never understand why people ask me why a bird wears a bell, as I would have thought it was blatantly obvious, but I could be wrong. There are 3 ways of attaching the bell, all of them totally painless, although I'm none too sure about the actual use of neck bells. The most common way is to place the bell on the leg with a leather strap, called a Buet strap. It should always be above the jess and below any ring. I much prefer the tail bell. This is glued and tied to the centre 2 tail feathers as is being demonstrated. There are more modern ways of doing it, such as cable ties, but being somewhat old-fashioned, I prefer the old method, as I know there is nothing there which can hurt the bird. Tail bells ring louder, last longer, leave legs freer, and can be heard from further away. What more can I say? As for neck bells, well, I am really not happy about putting anything round a bird's neck. Raptor legs and feet are incredibly strong. They are designed to hit quarry at speed, but their necks are much more vulnerable. So neck bells I have never used, and what's more, I have no intention of doing so. We've jessed the bird and belled it. Now the next thing we have to do is to weigh him so that we can find out what his fat, straight out of the aviary weight is. Take off the leash. We don't want to know the weight of the leash. Then gently lift him so that the tail goes over the back of the perch, and put one foot up onto the scales. Pressing the back of the leg against the scales, he should lift the other foot on. And make sure that no part of his wings are touching anything else on the scales. You must get a true reading. And this bird weighs 1 pound 10 1/4 ounces straight out of the aviary. Take the jesses with the bare hand, bring up the glove, slide it up the jesses, and just lift him, easing his talons gently off the scales. You can see he's pretty upset by the whole thing, but it is only the first day he's ever been handled since he was 2 weeks old. Now what I've done here is I've put the jesses into safety position. This is the most important thing to remember whenever you have a bird on the fist. Whenever you pick it up or put it down, put the jesses into safety position between the fingers so that if it moves, the swivel comes up against the fingers and it cannot get loose. And now what we'll do is take him outside, put him on the grass and let him settle. One of the worst crimes in my book is to let go of a bird with its swivel and leash on. Its chances of survival are very slim, trailing equipment, which will undoubtedly catch up somewhere. That is why when we return a bird to its perch, it remains on the fist and the knot is tied one-handed. If the hawk is sitting on the perch while being tethered, it is not under control and could get loose. That is also why the leash and swivel should always either be in safety position, or tied to the glove, or tightly coiled round the fingers. Knots are not my forte. However, the falconer's knot I can do blindfolded, in a hurry, in the dark, in the cold, when it's raining. All it takes is lots of practice. It's best to practice holding a full glass of water in the gloved hand. Then, while you are concentrating like mad on the knot, you will spill the water all over yourself and realise that had it been a bird, it would not have appreciated sitting at a 45-degree angle. Untrained birds don't like being picked up, so to avoid excess stress and feather damage, they must be picked up quickly and held away from anything that their feathers might hit. The leash must be secured before attempting to get the bird to sit up. Tying the leash to the glove is a good idea for beginners. As the bird gets tamer, it will learn to jump to the fist from the perch for a reward. In the earliest days of training, the birds are often startled and horrified by everything around them. With care and patience, they will come to accept such things as a leg bell without getting upset. Punch the hole. Take it off. Get the scissors and look as if you're going to. Oddly enough, returning an untrained bird to its perch is actually more difficult than picking it up. They seem to recognize their perch as home and will have more desire to get to it and away from their handler. This is why it's best to move well away from the perch area during all training sessions. There are a couple of things we haven't really touched on yet which might not seem related. Number one is food. It's very important that you have the right food for the bird and that it's good quality. And if it isn't good quality enough and the bird doesn't like it, you might have to resort to finding the bird after having lost it. And this little gadget here, which is radio telemetry, should help you do it. Now with the food, as I've said before, we always use beef when we're handling the birds because it's clean, high protein and all the rest of it. But occasionally you have to resort to using something else. This is a 5-week-old grown-on chicken, which I might use if I'm trying to encourage a bird that hasn't fed on beef before, and then slowly switch it over to beef. When you're using beef, it's much tougher than most other meat, so we use shin of beef, and you've got to cut it in a way which is easy for the young bird or the new bird to use. We get the beef cut down the grain. We get a whole lump of shin, and I cut it down the grain, not across. When I've got a really nice juicy bit for a young bird, I'd probably take a tougher bit for an older bird. I then slash the meat, cutting it across, avoiding the fingers, and then cutting it down so that it's almost cut through and diced. So when you have that on your fist and the bird starts to pull it first, it can bend down, pull a piece very gently, and immediately have a good bit that it can swallow. If it doesn't have a bit that it can swallow easily, it doesn't get encouraged. The other thing you've got to remember with food preparation is you'll need a fridge to keep the food in, and most people don't like bird food kept in with their human food. It could even be illegal. And you've got to make sure that everything is clean. This board looks a bit the worse for wear, but it is actually scrubbed every day and disinfected, as is the knife. Bags and gloves should also be kept just as clean. Now with the telemetry, we use an American system. It doesn't really matter what system you use so long as you practice with it before you lose the bird. If you wait until you've lost the bird and then try and work out how the hell to use the telemetry, you are stuck. This is a transmitter which has a battery in it, which goes in there. It's clipped, pushed into the transmitter and held on with a cable tie, or sometimes there's a black bit of rubber, Some of them have a screw top which keeps them in. Once you've got the battery in, check that it's working. And don't just hold it there and check. Hold it behind your back. Then the sound is going to go through your back and you are more sure that it actually is working. And check that the bleep sounds good. That'll tell you whether the battery is any good or not. If you've lost a bird, of course, you must fix the aerial on as well. We attach the telemetry to the bird using another cable tie which goes through the top, and we then put it onto the bird's leg normally while we're doing the weighing. The more variety of food that you use, the better off your bird will be. If you feed it on just one type of food, not only is it not particularly good for it, but you run quite a risk that the bird will only be used to one sort of food, and if you run out of that sort of food at any time, you are in dead stuck. We feed the birds here on beef, quail, chicken, rats, mice and rabbit. Never ever use food that has been shot, particularly not if it's been shot with a 12 bore, because lead pellets can kill the birds. Make sure that you know the origin of your food so you know what's happened to it before you've got it. Whenever we're feeding birds on the fist, we'll always use beef to start with. We may use quail or a rabbit leg later on. The reason we use beef is that it's high protein, it's clean, it's easy for them to pull bits off if you slash it before you put it on the fist. It doesn't ruin your falconry glove, or if you use day-old chicks, squirt egg yolk all over your clothes, which they're guaranteed to do. And it's also more acceptable to people who might see you feeding the bird. The other reason is that you can get a nice tough piece and the bird can only get small amounts off it when you want it to. If you have something that's going to fall to bits easily, the chances are the bird's going to have eaten far too much, more than you want it to. Now this bird is still not feeding, but you can see she's showing a little bit of interest. I keep touching her feet, moving my fist, making the meat move to try and get her concentration. There's a lot going on around her, and that disturbs her concentration. We may eventually have to end up taking her indoors where they will always respond more quickly. But for the time being, I want to try her outdoors and get her to feed if possible. Come on. She's very close to it. Everything that we're showing you here in the whole of this film is just our way of doing it. It's our opinion. It's my opinion. It's what we have found here works best. It isn't a hard and fast rule, and we're not saying that any other way is not right. What we are saying is that this is the way that we have found works best for our birds and what we do here. And we've been here 22 years. Come on. Now what I'm also doing here is not just getting the bird to feed on the fist, but doing what's called manning. I suppose you could call it womaning, really. Oh, she's so close. And basically all that is getting the bird used to you. And that's what takes the time in the early stages of training. You're going to need something like 2 hours a day with your bird for the first, say, month or 2 months before it starts to get tame. The training's very short. In most birds of prey, the training is only about 2 to 3 weeks. That falcon that we're flying for you is incredibly fast. That could be going loose in only 5 days. This is a little bit on the slow side, but then they do take longer because the falcons are the easiest. They're so greedy. But the taming takes time. Come on. If you're worried about a bird going underweight, watch its eyes. This bird's getting close to being underweight. She really has got to feed either today or tomorrow, and her eyes are starting to scrunch up a little. Instead of looking very big, when you first handle a bird, their eyes look enormous because they're so nervy. As they start to lose weight and begin to get close to the margin where you dropping them below it could be dangerous, the eyes will get smaller and they'll start to scrunch up. And hers are beginning to do that now. But as I say, she'll feed either today or tomorrow. And I'll stay here with this bird now for probably another hour, which you'll be delighted to hear you're not going to see, until she either responds, or I reckon that it's going to have to be maybe later on this evening or tomorrow morning before she'll actually feed. As I said, I will, if she doesn't feed tonight, probably try her indoors. But it's a great mistake if you try and train your bird indoors and do the whole thing. They're not learning anything. You can get a bird feeding quite happily indoors, bring it outdoors, and you'll find you have almost got to start again. Indoors, they're always much quieter than they are out of doors. The added advantage of a Labrador is that they make a great footstool. Very comfy. With falcons, you teach them all to wear a hood. You can teach any of the birds to wear a hood, but generally I don't bother with anything other than the falcons, because it's only the falcons that you take out 2 or 3 of at a time to fly, and you can only fly 1 at a time, so the other 2 must be hooded to stop them being excited by the first bird flying. This is a Saker cross peregrine, and Saker cross peregrines are extremely difficult to teach to hood anyway. So you just bring the hood in, and you take no notice of all this flat doodle, and you just gently slip it on the bird's head. Now you just leave it there to settle for a few minutes. Don't rush into it. Then you've got to do up the braces. And the mistake, and I do it myself, the mistake everyone makes when they're trying to do up the braces, they're so nervous that they're actually moving the bird away from themselves. So you've got to be conscious of that. Wait till the bird faces the right way, gently tap the hood into position, and pull the braces tightly, quickly. You're putting pressure down the bird's back so that if by any chance it pulls its head back, it's not going to get its head out of the hood. Now, they don't like the hood in the early stages, there's no doubt about it, but you've got to get them to settle and relax so that it becomes so much a part of their routine they don't mind. To take the hood off, you undo the braces once the bird's settled, but you don't remove the hood straight away. Leave it on there for a few seconds. Again, always take your time. There's no point in hurrying. If you hurry at this stage, you'll just upset the bird. Then rolling motion, just slip it off. Then put it on again. And take it off again. Stroke the bird with it. Wait, face the front you. All of this is perfectly normal. Make it an easy motion. Over the beak and slip it on. But once you've started, complete it. If the bird tries to get away from the hood, then it's succeeding in what it wants to do. It doesn't want to wear it. Take it off again. Put it on again. And you can see it gets easier and easier each time. Then do up the braces again. Just take your time. Now once you've done this a few times, the bird will slowly get used to it and relax in it, and you've got to leave that hood on for a period of time so it does get used to it. I don't like leaving birds hooded unattended. I think it's dangerous. The bird can come off a perch, it can get tangled up, nor do I like leaving birds hooded for hours at a time. I think it's very unfair on them. Sometimes it's necessary when you're travelling, but then when you're travelling you will be with the bird. The one thing you have got to be careful of with hoods, two things. Number one, if you're travelling, they can be sick. And if they are sick with the hood and the food can't get out, they can actually choke to death, and it has happened. The other thing that can happen is if you've got 2 or 3 birds hooded close by and one gets unbalanced and flicks its wing out, that can disturb the bird next door to it, who can lash out and grab hold of the accompanying bird's wing, which is why you should never at any time leave more than one bird hooded on its own. Last night this falcon fed on the fist for the first time. We're now going to see if he will jump to the fist. To do that we've got to make sure that he's secure, so I'm going to tie the leash to the glove so that if anything disastrous happens he can't go anywhere, or if he does go anywhere he's going to be taking a glove with him. Using the same falconer's knot, which is quite difficult to tie onto a glove, just secure him to the straps. Take off the hood, because they can't see where they're going otherwise. And you'll see when I take off the hood, I undo the braces or strike the braces first, but don't remove the hood immediately. Leave it there and then take it off, so that the bird doesn't get into the habit of pulling back immediately you undo the braces. Put the hood somewhere, usually on the ground, and in my bag I have a rather delicious piece of meat, which we're going to give him a tiny bit of. Yes. Then we're going to put him on the perch. Any old perch will do, but make sure that it's not slippery. Here I've got one specially built for them that is covered in carpet, but you don't have to go that far. Now look, there it is, look here. And this is where we ask him to jump to the fist for a reward. And he's never done this before. Oh, very good. But the reason this bird is being so incredibly quick to train is that I have not handled him for 2 weeks, but he's been tethered for 2 weeks. So he's been on his perch, he's learned about jesses, he's settled, he's learned to feed on the perch, and all of this now comes much, much quicker than it would do if you started from the word go. So this time a little bit further. And again, a very quick reaction. I whistled because the whistle is going to be part of his life. He's got to understand that the whistle means I want him to come, and so you start using the whistle right from the word go. When I put him back on the perch, you'll see I make sure his tail is over the back, and I drop, you've got your talons all twisted, I drop my hand below the perch, and he will then step back naturally onto the higher perch. Now we're going to try that once more. And then as he's being so quick, I'm going to see if we can actually introduce him to the lure today as well. Although training birds of prey is surprisingly quick, they do have to be under control until they know the job and can be flown loose. So a training line is used. It is called a creance, which I'm told has something to do with string in French. It should be braided terylene or nylon so that it is strong enough not to break and thick enough not to cut the bird. The lure is used to lure the bird back. Surprise, surprise. A lure can be used for any of the family groups of raptors, but is most commonly used with the falcons. It is important not to ask a bird to come too far at first, but also not to put the lure too close, or the bird won't have the confidence to drop at a very steep angle. Without doubt, making in to the bird on the lure and picking up is one of the most important parts of the training. If you hurry the bird, it will end up carrying, and if it does this with its kills, which are not on the end of a line, one tends to look very silly. So, patience is of the essence. A slow, low approach with food offered as a fair exchange is the key to the whole thing. Good boy. To call a bird in, you need a lure. For the falcons we use a lure made out of a pair of wings. For the other birds we use a dummy bunny. The reason we use a dummy bunny is that these days we're using only captive bred birds. It's no longer legal to take birds from the wild for falconry. And so with the captive bred birds, they don't necessarily know what a real rabbit looks like. So we use a dummy to teach them what it is we want them to hunt. You can either use a made-up one like this, or you can use a dead rabbit. But it's not always easy to get a dead rabbit, so we use a dummy bunny to start with. This one's called Legless, has a nice pair of ears, nice tail, no legs. Now for the lure I use a pair of wings, preferably from a magpie, a moorhen or a partridge. They're rounder, they're shorter, they swing more easily. I don't like the bigger wings. We put them back to back, so it's got to be a pair. And where the primaries and the secondaries join, put a piece of string. Make sure the string is strong enough that it won't snap in your hands. And you tie the two together with a reef knot, which is right over left and left over right. You then get a piece of meat, and the size piece of meat will depend entirely on how heavy you want the lure, and you cut a nick in the side of the piece of the meat so that it will fit nicely with the string. The string goes on, yet another reef knot tied tightly. The joy of making up a lure every day is that it means it's checked every day. The trouble with a lure that is a dummy one made of leather is that it doesn't always get checked each day, and the line can snap. You then put the string through the swivel on the end of the lure, tie another reef knot on the side so that it doesn't catch on the swivel, and your lure is then made up, ready to go, looking deliciously appetizing. With a dummy bunny, it's much the same thing. Use a much smaller piece of meat because you want the bird to eat the whole piece of meat on the rabbit. Get another piece of string, tie it round the rabbit, usually towards the head end, to try and encourage the bird to go towards the head, and in that way when it comes to hunting it's less likely to get kicked off. Reef knot number 4, piece of meat onto the knot, tied on good and securely. Not quite so vital if it comes off the rabbit. You look very silly if your piece of meat comes off your lure. And then your rabbit is ready to go. You bung them both in your falconry bag, and away you go. "8 days ago you saw this bird first feed on the fist. She's now got a name. Her name's Hebrides. And she's gone up from 1.9, she's quite a small Harris hawk, 1 pound 9 ounces, which is what she weighed when she first fed. She's now up to 1 pound 11 ounces, and she's jumping to the fist, and I hope being introduced to the dummy bunny. We choose a nice post to put her on. She's comfortable on that. Be careful of something like this when a bird's on the line. Just be aware of it so that it can't get caught up at all. as long as you know it's there, you won't have a problem. And bring the jesses and the creants to the front, so that if it does jump to the fist, it's not going to get caught up. Wind is vital, always is. You have to think about the direction of the wind before you ask a bird to come. This bird will not jump to the fist if you ask it to jump downwind. Later on, when it's experienced, it could probably cope with it, but not at the moment. So we're going to ask her to jump to the fist, only a short distance, for a nice juicy bit of meat. Very good. She's been doing this now for 4 days. Take the meat away, put her back on the post, jesses to the front again, and extend the distance that we're going to ask her to come. Very good. Better than I expected. She's just got the creants caught there. Make sure we get it all so that it's free and she's comfortable. And we just go on increasing the distance the whole time, getting her confident, making sure she doesn't eat too much in between times. Sometimes if you increase the distance too far, what happens is that the bird gets excited that it's in the air and it may go over the top of the fist. This could possibly happen this time, particularly as we're close to a tree. Good girl. She's got an extraordinary way of coming. She goes up and then down. Later on, as she gets more experience, she'll drop below the fist and come up onto it. Off you go. Off. You'll see sometimes I put her onto the post backwards, sometimes forwards. It doesn't make any difference. So long as you drop your hand below whatever you're asking them to go onto, they will always go to the higher perch. There's got to be a joke there somewhere. Now we'll try her one last time, just a little bit further. Good girl. And the thing we want to do now is just see if she will be in the slightest bit interested in the dummy bunny. Now we're going to introduce her to Legless. What I'm going to do is take him out of the bag, throw him gently on the ground in front of her and see if she'll catch him. If she doesn't, I'll give it a twitch just to attract her attention. This is the rare flying rabbit. Poor old Hebrides was rather too full of food to be interested in Legless by this time. In fact, she was decidedly apprehensive, but this is common with many buzzards and eagles. So the trick is to bring the bird to the rabbit rather than the other way round. Show the bird that the rabbit has meat on it, and eventually it will work. Good girl. The weighing machine is the most important bit of equipment that you will have. This is what tells you how the bird is, what's happening, what its health is like, and what its flying weight is. So have an accurate pair. Most people have an old pair of balance scales with weights on one end and a perch on the other. Make sure your weights are government stamped. If you're using And old kitchen scales, the old spring balance, don't bother, throw it away. I've known them kill birds because they're inaccurate. And even with these scales, we check them on a regular basis to make sure they're still reading accurately. Now this bird weighs 1 pound 8 ounces. This is the bird we've been training right the way through. He came out of the aviary at 1 pound 10.5 ounces. He went down to 1.6.5 and is now coming up again and still flying well. In fact, flew loose today at that weight. To make sure we know where the weights are going, we chart them down. You can either put them on a blackboard, as we do, with the bird's name, its flying weight, and a week's weights down under the days of the week, or you can have a book. And in the book you can not only put the weight of the bird, but you can also put the sort of things that it does, whether it behaved, whether it hung upside down, who it bit that day, and when it comes to hunting, what it caught and where it caught it. And it's great fun to look back on it afterwards. But don't forget, whichever way you go, the weight of the bird is absolutely vital. We're now a week into the training of this falcon, and he is actually going loose. But what we're going to do is show you some of the earlier stages, so we're going to go back a little bit. And I'm also going to show you a little trick that I have got for myself, which is with the leash and swivel, when you take it off, usually people shove it in their pocket. If they're using, sit still, if they're using a jacket rather than a bag, they might put it into a pocket there, and it's very easy to lose it. If you take the swivel off, slide it onto the leash, fold the leash in half once and then again, and put it onto the strap of your falconry bag, then at no time can you ever lose it. The only danger is you might get it caught in the horn of a charging bull, but that doesn't happen very often. Before we fly a falcon free, we always make sure that it will catch the lure in mid-air and that it will turn on the line. The catch is important. If you have to use the lure when hunting, the grass is unlikely to be mown and the lure will disappear from the bird's sight if it falls in long grass or heather. The turn is also important, although it is very unlikely that a bird won't turn, particularly if it has been taught to catch first. Right, he's now loose, so I'm not going to let him have it this time. But I am going to let him have it this time. Ho! Watch how carefully the pickup is achieved. Slow and low are the watchwords throughout the bird's life. Once a bird is flying free, the quicker it is shown quarry, the better. We give them a couple of days free flying to build confidence, and then off we go. Although many people travel birds on perches or cadges, I much prefer a good travelling box. Birds can sit unhooded. They can choose where they sit, and several can be travelled together in a vehicle with complete safety. Trying to film a young falcon catching its first grouse just shows how very difficult entering falcons is. It was really very unfair of us to expect a young bird to do anything in 2 days, and we knew that from the outset. But we felt that we should try, for the sake of the film, to give anyone watching a tiny taste of fast net flying in true hunting country. Needless to say, he caught nothing and was really at a loss as to what to do. However, had he been given more time, he would have succeeded. Flying hawks is far less complicated, and we had great fun, as did Hebrides and Tamale, my Labrador. At one point we caught a very dead rabbit that a stoat had killed. But again, because we were concentrating on filming rather than hunting, we didn't catch a live bunny. Still, it was close, and without the film crew, one bunny would have met its Waterloo, that's for sure. Later in the day we went out with Martin Jones, his dogs and his falcons. Martin spends up to 7 weeks every year in Scotland, and that is the sort of dedication needed to fly falcons seriously. There is much more to the enjoyment of falconry than the kill, but every now and again everything goes right and you get the chance to see teamwork at its very best.
All right, get him up, Mackie. Ho! Try to bind to him.
Well, there it is. Should anyone seriously want to take up falconry, the subject must be learnt before getting the bird, and I advise a good course. What should never be forgotten is that not only is there a long-term responsibility for a living creature's life, but also its quality of life.